Hi, this is Pat Baker, and I want us to take a look at another example of reading data from a file rather than getting your data as an input from the user. So let's take a look at what our next steps are going to be. In this class, we will be looking at only sequential access files, or what are called streams. In other words, you're going to read the first piece of data, then the second piece of data, then the third piece of data, rather than a random access file. That's a more advanced concept. So let's take a look at the file we're going to be reading for this short example. So I'm giving you a little look into my workspace here, and I've created a package called Chapter 10 Files, and there is our stream that we're going to be reading in, and there's our starting Java program. But this is just a text file that I created in Notepad, and let's see what's in it. Okay, so it has candy bars and then their calories. So Snickers has 215 calories per serving, etc., etc. Almond Joy, my personal favorite, has 80 calories per serving. So we're going to go ahead and create a small program that just reads this data in one line at a time and then goes ahead and writes it back out. This is also called a stream because we're going to read this line of data, then this line of data, then this line, and so forth, rather than reading, let's say, Snickers 215 and then Almond Joy. In other words, a random access. We're going to be reading things in sequential, which is called a stream. So I've popped open Eclipse and have our file, our Java program here, and we're just going to walk through the 4 steps so that we can read our candy calories and then write it back out. So the step number 1 is to make necessary classes available. We're working with IO, input output, so I'm importing several classes here. And then we're going to use the scanner class in this example also. So here's my class and my main. I have added this this line of code here because when you're working with files, they can generate what are called checked exceptions. In other words, you might not have access to the file or the file doesn't exist. So you need to acknowledge that, and that's how we do that. We're going to learn more about exceptions when we actually get into Chapter 10. So there's step number 1, and let's go on to step number 2. So in step number 2, we're going to create an input file object. Everything in Java is mostly deals with objects, and we're going to use that object and associate it with our physical file, candy calories over here. And when we do that, it will open candy calories. Let's just pop it over here too so we can see it. And it will put the read marker right here at the top of the file. So do all of that in one statement, and then we're ready to use not the physical file name anymore, but the object name, which will be in file. So at this point, candy calories is open, and we're going to access candy calories via the in-file object. So let's go ahead and look at step number 3 now that we have our file open. So step number 3 is to read data from our input file, candy calories, and we're going to read our data until the end of the file is reached, and every line we read, we're going to process this. So we happen to know, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff up here so I don't have to look at it. Sure. And we happen to know it has 4 lines, but you could add lines to it. And let's say you didn't know how many lines there were. So you want your code to be general purpose. And when we don't know how many times we want a loop to execute, that's a great choice. A great choice would be to use a while loop. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to use our features of our scanner object in file to help us with that. So I started my while loop, and I want to say while my file, which is associated with this object, has another line, so it looks like it's going to return a Boolean. So as long as this remains true, or as long as there's another line to read, then I want to go ahead and get that line from the file and then process it. So that will be, we'll see how that's done inside this while loop. So you can see I added another variable up here called line. It's just a string. And I'm going to read each line of candy calories as a string. And our goal here is just read it in and then write it back out. All we're doing here is just illustrating how to read a line at a time from a file. So you're pretty darn familiar with the scanner class. So we can say that each line, every line we read from InFile, which is just a scanner, and you can use the next line method. We're going to go ahead and put that line into the string. And we probably want to do something with that. So any additional processing, can happen here. But this is just reading each line and putting it into the string variable. So let's see what we want to do. So we're not doing anything too snazzy here. We're just showing you how it's reading one line. We're going to read a line, and then we're going to print it right back out to the console. And that is the end of step 3, reading data. So at this point, when we get out of this loop, we've reached the end of our file. In other words, there's not another line to read. And the last step, let's make that a comment. Step 4 is to go ahead and close the file. So just like you've done with scanner objects before, you're going to do the same with this. This just happens to be associated with the file. So hey, let's see if it's working. It looks like we got something pretty close. So let's run it. Are we lucky? Yeah, it just went ahead and wrote out Snickers, Milky Way, Red Vines, Almond Joy back to our console. So it was reading each line at a time. And you could prove to yourself that it was doing that. If you wanted to add something else to your system.out, we could do that. So let's do that. Okay, so I haven't done anything too snazzy here. I've just added a string to put, or a literal to put in front of each line we read that says candy, and now our output to the console should say that instead. So it's reading something, it's reading this line, and then it's writing out this line. Then it's reading, actually I should go here, it's reading this line, and then outputting, where'd I go with my output here? And outputting the next line. So, and so forth. So that's really all there is to reading from a file. We can do more inside here, but the baseline, or the basics are just these 4 steps. And the real key is that you're creating a Java object and associating it with the physical file. So hopefully that another example helps you out. Go back and look at the slides again, and then you can work on that very first activity.